Today we're covering 8th grade, Chapter 3, Lesson 6, Equations in y equals mx plus b form. So this is a very special formula called slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form. In this, the m is the slope and the b is the y-intercept. So y equals mx plus b. And y-intercept means where it crosses the y-axis. It's the y-coordinate when it crosses the y-axis. For example, down here at this graph right here, see where the line is crossing the y-axis? That point right there is the y-intercept. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that would be crossing at the 4. So for example 1, we're going to write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form with a slope of -3 and a y-intercept of -4. So y equals something times x plus something. So the number that goes in front of x is always the slope, and if the slope is -3, and the y-intercept is always the number by itself, the constant, the b. And you can also write it as y equals -3x minus 4. Remember our integer rules. -4 is the same as plus a -4. So those are the same thing. Now let's look at how to write it in slope-intercept form starting from a table. So first we'll need to find the slope. And if you'll remember, finding the slope is the change of y over the change of x. So we just need to pick a couple of intervals. And the y's I just picked were 13 minus 9. And the x that went with 13 is 4. And the x that went with 9 is 2. 13 minus 9 is 4. And 4 minus 2 is 2. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the slope is going to be 2. And the y-intercept is wherever x is 0. So if you go back to our graph down here, this point where it crossed, that was 0, 4. So wherever x is 0, the number that's the y is the y-intercept. So for this one, that would be -5. I'm sorry, +5. It's right here. That's the y-intercept. And then we're going to write that in our formula. So y equals something times x plus. So the slope goes in front of x, and the y-intercept is the plus. Now let's try writing it from a graph. Again, we're going to need the slope. So we're going to pick 2 lines. And I think they kind of have 2 lines picked out for you. You can kind of see there's one. So we know that the first one that I picked was 0, 4. And this one is 2, 3. So the y's are 4 minus 3. And the x that went with 4 was 0. And the x that went with 3 was 2. 4 minus 3 is 1. And 0 minus 2 is -2. So the slope of this line is negative. And anytime the line is going down like that, it's going to be negative. If it's going up, then it's positive. And the y-intercept was 4. And then we just put the numbers into the equation. Y equals something times x plus the y-intercept. So our slope was negative 1/2, and the y-intercept was 4. Let's look at some of the problems you're going to be doing by yourself. The first few, they just flat out give you what the slope is and what the y-intercept, and you're going to plug them into the formula. So looking at number 3 maybe, it'll be y equals something times x plus something. Remember, the number beside x is the slope, and then the other number, the constant, the number by itself, is the y-intercept. So they said the slope is 1/2, and the y-intercept is -3. And you will need to remember that that's the same as -3. Plus a -3 is the same as just -3. Okay. The next two, you have tables, and you're going to have to find the y-intercept and the slope, and then put them into that equation. Something times x plus the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, you always look for 0. That's the easy one to find. And then to find the slope, it's the change of y over the change of x. And I'm going to pick -13 minus -7. And the x that went with -13 is 2, and the x that went with -7 is 0. Then we have to remember those rules for integers. Keep, change, opposite. So that makes my top number -13 plus a +7. Different signs we got to subtract, so that's -6 over 2, which is -3. So my slope is -3, and the y-intercept is, and we plug it into that equation, something times x plus the y-intercept. And then we have a graph. And again, the y-intercept is the easy one to find. It's where x is 0, and the slope will be where you subtract the 2 points. Okay? So the y-intercept, again, that's where x is 0, so y-intercept is -3. And then the slope is where we're going to subtract the points. So the two y's are -3 minus 0. And then the x that went with -3 is 0 minus the x that went with 0, -3. Okay, -3 minus 0 is still -3. And keep, change, opposite. That makes a +3. And -3 divided by +3 would make -1. And if we plug that into the equation, the slope is -1, and the y-intercept was -3. Okay, but we usually write that as y equals, and we don't usually put a 1 in front of the x. So I'm not going to put the 1. I'm just going to put -x minus 3. Those are the same equations, exactly the same.